to do it again. Really, this can be choosing your first radio, second radio, third radio, and on. I'll have to tell you one quick story. Back when we were doing the know-it-all net, Jeff asked me to make a comment about the radios that I had. So I'm sitting in my shack, and I didn't notice my wife right around the corner in the room. So as I'm going through my radios, I'm saying, okay, I got this radio for HF, I got this one for, I've got a dual band here. She's over there holding up fingers. And I see dollar signs. So, be careful when you say that. All right, turn it over to Ed for this.
Is that the Pro? Watch out.
Good evening, everybody. How you doing?
Hey,
So I want you to kind of bend around in your seats and face that corner over there. Raise your left hand and kind of slowly push it up and down until the air up here. So we put this together, choosing your first radio. We figured for a technical presentation for him, this is probably a big one because everybody goes through this, choosing your first radio. So why do you need a radio? Yeah, that sounds like an obvious question, but today that's not necessarily an obvious question. We've got a lot of things available to where, as a ham radio operator, you can get on the air without a radio. We've got echo links, the DB dongles, remote bases. There's a lot of opportunities now available for you to get on the air without a radio. So the world has changed a little bit in the last few years. So there's a lot of alternatives besides the radio. But hey, you've got to have a radio. This is ham radio, right? So how many people don't have a radio yet? All the newbies have radios? How many has just one radio? 2 hands, 3 hands, okay, 3 hands. 2 to 5? A lot more hands. 6 to 10? I'm close to the other half. More than 11? You remember the potato chip commercial, you can't just have one? That's a lot like ham radio. Lots of different things, lots of different reasons, a lot of not reasons. I do a lot of work up at Dayton and some other places, and people come, it's like, what radio should I get? That is the hardest question because it's really, really particular to the person. I'm weird. What I want is different from what you want. What everybody wants is different from what everybody else wants. That's kind of the good part, and it's kind of the bad part, because it's really hard for a person to decide what should be their first radio. What should I go out there and buy? What should be that first radio? So, in making that decision, I think what you need to think about is, what do you want to do? Because remember in ham radio, there's a lot of things that you can do. So the question is really, what do you want to do? You want to talk to people near you, the folks in the club? You want to talk to people far away? You don't want to talk to anybody. You talk to people far away. You want to do CW, code? You want to do digital modes with a computer? You want to do digital modes by voice? Lots of, and more out here. Lots of different things. But you kind of need to decide what you want to do as to which radio that you get, because generally there's not one radio that does everything that you want. So that's always a big question to have. Here are some other things to do. Anybody know how many satellites we have in the air right now?
400 or 500.
All of them.
She's counting right now. Let's see if we can answer.
She said around 20.
Around 20. 20 satellites floating around in the air. I think there's actually a lot more than that up there, but it's still a really big number. Active, okay. We got people who bounce signals off the moon. And Jupiter, I think, and all over the places. I mean, weird. But it's pretty impressive that we can do things like that. Travel operator of the expeditions. Contesting. Contesting is really, really big in amateur radio. A lot of people love contesting. Things like field day. A lot of other contests. There are so many contests every weekend and probably during the weeks that you can participate in. So a lot of different things. Experimentation. You know, that is kind of one of the things that amateur radio is built for. The amateur radio service is for experimentation. How many other esoteric modes can you think of? Anybody got any other? Yes? Aries, emergency communications, emergency services. Anything else?
Summits on the air.
Summits on the air, yep.
Slow scan.
Video. Video's a good one. Slow scan.
Dog show.
Public service dog shows. There's a lot more out there. And that's part of the things with ham radio is over the years I've been ham radio. I do this for a while, I get burned out, I go find something else to do. And of course, probably means a new radio, needs new this, that, and the other, so yeah, I gotta spend some more money out here. But a lot of things to do, and so that's really what you need to think about is when you get your first radio or when you're buying a radio, what is it that you want the radio for? So one of the first kind of delineating factors is, are you going a HF radio or a VHF, UHF type radio? Now, the HF radios is what everybody kind of knows as ham radio. Got another slide in here. That type of stuff, the VHF, UHFs are all the handhelds that we've got. They're not generally compatible with each other, and they have very different price points. So the HF, you know, the antenna about $50, power supply another $100, radio $700. So you know you're looking at $1,000 kind of to start really in some new HF radios. You get some used ones for a little bit cheaper, but it's still pretty darn expensive to get into HF. And there's some single bands and some other hobby types that are even cheaper, but those low power ones are actually sometimes kind of hard to operate, especially for a new user. VHF, UHF. Who in here has got a Bayphone or one of the $50 radios? Yeah, we've got a bunch of those in here.
Now 25.
Say again, $25?
25 on Amazon.
Yeah, they are generally what a lot of folks cheap throwaway radios. At $25, if you lose it, you should not really care about it too much. But that's where you can start. So generally, something like a VHF, UHF becomes where most people start into amateur radio. VHF, UHF, they can talk to people that they can see their faces. They can meet people local to them. They can find out people that will help them along in their expeditions of figuring out what amateur radio is. So along that way, which band are you going to use? Let's switch these slides around. So HF, historically, is what is known as amateur radio. When you talk to most of the rest of the people who don't know what this is, that's what they think of. They think of amateur radio as being able to talk around the world. We're the folks that have all the emergencies, the disasters around the world. That's what we're known for because that's what gets in the news all the time. HF, takes some bigger antennas to put up, a little bit of effort to put into those. The VHF, UHF, a lot of folks kind of think that it's been around forever, and it's been around for quite a long time, but it's actually kind of a baby compared to HF. So it really started up in the 70s as some surplus equipment started becoming available from the commercial folks. And we started getting these really nice little portables, you know, the portables that were like this big, and the mobiles that were like this big. Hams in that day loved those things. But in general, the VHF, UHF are the small handheld radios. You're going to talk about 30, 40, 50 miles, something like that with them. Generally, we're going to use a repeater, which is a piece of equipment that's up on a mountain that basically does a, what do I hear? I'm going to repeat it. And the way repeaters operate, just to give a little bit of information on them, is there's two frequencies. There's an input and there's an output. Why are there two frequencies? So what happens if you're talking at the same time that you're listening? Well, you can't hear yourself. That's why they use two frequencies. One is the one that they listen on, one's the one that they talk on. There's actually a filter at the repeater site so that it kind of keeps them from hearing each other. So it's a little interesting the way the repeaters work, but your radio only transmits on one frequency and then listens on another one. And so if you haven't ever noticed it, when you push to talk, that frequency is going to change on the radio. If it's on VHF, it's going to go down or up by 0.6. So here's kind of a picture of the electromagnetic spectrum. You cannot see any of it from where you're out there. But we start over here on the far left with the very low frequencies. That's 3 to 30 kilohertz. We put radios there. We've now, what's our lowest? Do we have a band in below 30 kilohertz now? We're still above that. 2000?
630 is the low one.
630 kilohertz. Okay, so it's still down below there. But if we were talking about voice, this is where the voice sits. This is the frequencies that your voice normally uses. We can do some radio there, but it's the voice. Low frequencies, 30 to 300 kilohertz. You know, 100 years ago, this was just state-of-the-art science, being able to talk on frequencies this high. 300 kilohertz was so good. That's where the original communications came through on these frequencies right here. The hams then, well, once we figured out we could talk on these frequencies, the hams kind of got pushed out. So they were pushed up into the really high frequencies of the medium frequencies, the 300 kilohertz to 3 megahertz. Well, we got on there and started playing, and guess what? We could do all sorts of stuff with those frequencies. So the commercial guys came in and pushed us out of that one, made us go to these really high things called the HF. But that's the HF that I've been talking about. We still have big allocations in HF. We still do a lot of work there. But we got to share lots and lots of it now. So we were in the HFs, really, if you were an amateur radio in the 60s up to the early 70s, HF was the only thing basically that you did. At the end of the 70s, all of a sudden we got some VHF. 30 to 300 megahertz. Now you might think about, why are these 30s? Everything's a 3 in these numbers. Well, that's if you go back to your math that everybody had when they took the class. You take the speed of the light divided by the frequency and you get the wavelength. And so that's where the 30 comes from. So the 30 megahertz HF. VHF, and now UHF, we really combine these together a lot. VHF 30 to 300 megahertz. UHF 300 to 3,000 megahertz. We don't do a lot of work up at the 3,000 megahertz. But we got ham bands up there. We've got a lot of hams that are active up there. And we've got folks that are sitting up here in this next block, and I think the next block above that. We've actually got bands up those areas with people who work. Those are the microwave bands, those type things up there, where people just, they have a lot of fun with ham radio working them up there. Is that a question? So, I think it's a little obvious that for a new ham, HF is probably not where you want to go. Because it's harder, more expensive to get into it. I'm not saying that don't do it, but the best thing is probably start with VHF and UHF. So when we started VHF, UHF, what are we looking up here? So you've got to get a radio. It's one of the things I'll talk about where you can get it from in a second. You probably want to get a programming cable with that radio. Because everybody in here should have been able to program a frequency in their radio. Has everybody programmed a frequency in the radio? Has everybody programmed a frequency in radio and saved it in a memory? How many have done 100 of them? 100 memories by hand on the radio. Yeah, the hands up.
Yeah, I had both on.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to go through, and it's a lot of which one am I on? Well, I'm confused now. Dang it, I entered this one wrong. Did I enter it wrong, or did I fix the other one right? Or which one was it? The battery should come generally with the radio, the charger, and an antenna. So out of the box, you can get on the air and operate. The nice thing about the VHF, UHF is it gets people on the air very, very quickly. VHF, UHF is really line of sight type communications. Local around 30 miles. So we got some repeaters up on top of Stone Mountain, and basically if you see Stone Mountain, you can talk on it. Now, you can't necessarily see the repeater in Snellville, the 147.075 repeater, but actually if you kind of move some trees and buildings out of the way, you can probably see it from a lot of places around. Just don't realize it. But generally, these are line of sight communications for the VHF, UHF. So again, talk about the repeater a little bit. When you're talking, you talk to the repeater. Your radios, especially the handhelds, are putting out a couple of watts. How much power is 075 putting out today, Ed? 90 watts. How many people in here own a VHF, UHF radio that can do 90 watts? A couple. It's not common for users to ever use that much. Why would a repeater ever want to use that much? Because it really wants people to hear it no matter what. And what that generally means is that that repeater can out-talk it, what it can hear. So you will be able to hear the repeater very, very well, but the repeater is not going to hear you that well on the fringes. That's one of the reasons why you have a lot of noisy people on there. Now you can reduce the repeater power and you don't hear it as far, but then the repeater becomes a lot noisier to most people when they're listening. So it's a little bit of trade-off on how you will do all this, but that's generally one thing that's got a lot more power. It repeats your signal, whatever comes in goes out. Now on FM, if you ever notice, have you ever switched from the repeater talking to a person to simplex talking to the person? Do they sound the same? No. They don't sound the same whatsoever. On FM, when I transmit on my radio, there's a filter in the radio that adjusts my voice characteristics to be optimized to transmit over FM. On the receiver at the repeater, there's another filter that undoes what it does. That conversion is not 100%. And then at the repeater, there's another filter on the transmitter that adjusts it again, and then on your receiver, it gets adjusted again. So on FM, your voice, I'll use the word, gets distorted 4 times through a repeater, where you're on simplex, it's only 2 times. And you can hear the difference. It is sometimes quite pronounced. Some of this sometimes has a little bit to do with the tuning of the repeater. Because you gotta get the voice levels right between the receivers and the transmitters on the repeaters. And sometimes you get it right. And ours has got some remote bases in where when you had the remote bases, you had to get another set of scrambling of the voice going on. So a lot of things could go on with your voice signal. So a lot goes on with your voice on FM that you never see as it's going through the repeater. But basically, you talk, the repeater hears you on one frequency, transmits you back out on another frequency. Now, on 2 meters, what's the standard offset?
600.
600 kilohertz.
600.
Okay, I hear a 600 and a point or a 0.6, which is right.
Depends on what, you say 0.6, 600.
So this can be confusing for new users. Very confusing. It's 600 kilohertz or 0.6 megahertz. Those are the same numbers. So it's like 1K versus 1,000. They're the same number when you look at those. What's the standard offset on 440? 5 megahertz. Okay, here's one. What's the standard offset on on 220? 1.6. On VHF, the offsets will switch from being a plus to a minus. To a degree, and there's history behind this one. Originally, the only frequencies that we had was 146 to 147. And so all the repeaters fit in there, and they were all set up with a minus 600 offset. So the repeater started at 146, 600, went to 147, just below 147, all minus 0.6. But then we got the 147 to 148 portion of the band for repeaters. Because technology was not that great in those days, the folks decided that we need to keep the transmitters closer to each other so the user's receivers could be better tuned. And so therefore, on 147, the offset's in the other direction. It's a plus offset. And then we go down 145, we realized that we didn't have to make those type things again, so we ended up with a minus in 145. So it gets really confused. Your radios quite often know these, but there are some repeaters that don't fit to those standards. The coordinating agency for repeaters, Southeastern Repeater Association, tries to fix those, but there's still some of them around. So, tone. That's another thing that you have to think about when doing FM. What's a tone? Can you hear the tone when we're talking about it? I see heads shaking no. I see heads saying yes. And the tones range from 67 to 147 hertz?
255.
255, okay, yeah. So, when you're in the lower frequencies, you can't hear those. When they're higher frequencies, you can hear those. And so depending upon what the repeater owner has chosen, you may be able to hear the tone sometimes. Sometimes you might. Also, some of the radios have filter in them just to keep them from being heard. The repeaters themselves will have filters from the receiver to the transmitter, so the repeater actually has to re-inject tone in the transmitter so that the radios can hear them. So that tone, well, what does it do? Why do I have to have that? So the reason for the tone is, think about this repeater up here. Think about the repeater from Stone Mountain. How far can you hear on VHF from Stone Mountain? Anybody ever gone up and see how far away they could talk from top of the mountain? Yeah.
How far